So this is one of those perennial issues that's been discussed since the beginning of time, the beginning of human civilization, and will continue to be discussed and debated until the end of human civilization. I know the Bible talks about it, lots of different sources talk about it, probably because it's so critical to the family, to society, to social values, to how people live their lives. And that is if and when children leave their parents' houses, to stop being supported by their parents in one way or another. And I use the term children here not to refer to a mental state, a financial state, or a biological state. I just mean purely in the relationship that the child is the biological or adopted offspring of the parents. So, like in that context, I would still say my father is the child of, well, my grandparents, although they're dead now. But even when they were in their 90s, I'd still say he is their child because of the relationship between them. Makes sense, just defining terms a bit before we get into this. So the question is, when should children have to leave their parents' houses? Is there a defined time? Is every case independent? Like, you have to look at the individual circumstances. What's the life of the parents? What's their financial situation? What's the life of the child? What's their financial situation? What's the culture? What's the economy? All these kind of things. Or is there kind of some general overarching view that you can take of this sort of thing? And this kind of came up to me because someone sent me a tweet by some conservative hack who was like, when my kids turn 18, I'm going to kick them out of the house and be like, you can't come back. You're done. You're done. You're gone. And this is a perspective that I find a lot of Anglos have. And I've had, like, there's a Hispanic friend I had who said, I hate Anglos because the idea that you just disown your children basically when they turn 18 disgusts me, because that's just not how my culture works. And I mean, there's varying interpretations of this. In some cases, what they mean is you have to get a job. I'm not necessarily kicking you out of the house, but you have to have a job, or you have to be in school, or you have to move out, but I'll still provide you with some support, or I'll pay for your education, or something like that. Or it just means you're basically out on the street, and whatever happens to you, happens to you. And like I said, a lot of Anglo conservatives tend to have this perspective that if kids stay with their parents beyond them becoming legal adults, it means they're irresponsible, or they're infantilized, or they're big babies, or whatever you want to call it. And you have to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And I find kind of an extension of this is the idea that you don't owe your kids an inheritance, that you shouldn't leave them any money, that you shouldn't leave them a house, that intergenerational wealth is a bad idea because it makes people entitled. You have to spend all your money before you die, even if it's on frivolous things, and your kids should get nothing because they should be self-made. I find that's very much, maybe I'm straw manning it, but a lot of kind of Anglo conservatives say that. And that's not the way a lot of other cultures work. In a lot of other cultures, multiple generations of the family will live together. There'll be like a generational house that's paid off, and kind of in return, the son will take care of the parents financially when they're older. There's a lot of different relationships. In some cultures, you don't really move out until you get married. There's also a lot of different arrangements. Like, I think it's very different if you have the like stereotype of the neat living in the basement, watching hentai, having their mother make them chicken tendies, or someone who lives with their parents while they're going to school and intends to get a job, or someone who's they're working their way up in a company. They don't have the money yet to move out or to buy their own place, but they are actively pursuing a career. They are working. And in a lot of these cases, the children will pay their parents, not as much as full rent, but to help to cover utilities and the food they eat. Maybe it's only like a somewhat token amount of money, like maybe $300, $400, $500 a month, versus rent, which is, at least where I live, about $1,500 for a hole in the wall. because I don't know how much it really costs your parents to just have you sleeping in the room that you slept in beforehand. Maybe that's naive or ignorant of me, but there's that type of thing. So I think there's a lot of different relationships here, and as with a lot of things in life, I think it's kind of hard to have something exact. There's also some people are just more naturally independent than others. Some people are more entrepreneurial than others. Generally speaking, I think in life, so long as you're moving forward, at least in some regards, that's where you want to be. So I'm going to be honest, because I'm an honest guy and I try to be real with you. For most of my kind of adult life, I probably lived with my parents. And for the vast majority of that, I've been working, professional job, making a decent paycheck. I generally speaking give them some monthly rent, but it's not like I'm spending that money on alcohol or booze or drugs or stuff like that. The vast majority of my salary for, I guess, the last 4 or 5 years has been going into long-term investments, filling up my TFSA, my RRSP, stuff like that. At the moment, I'm doing my master's degree part-time while working full-time at a professional job, and eventually I'm going to move on to a better career, and then I'll probably move out wherever that is. But I don't really think there's anything wrong with it. Once again, it's not like I'm sitting around on my ass playing video games all day. I have a career, I'm going to education, I'm not wasting the money on frivolous stuff. That's how you build up intergenerational wealth. That's how you get your kids to really get going in life. I don't know if the cost is really that exorbitant on the parents, especially if the kid's contributing to food and utilities and stuff like that. But once again, like, we're going to talk about family values, we're going to talk about the family unit and sticking together and that kind of thing. I mean, supporting your kid is like what you're supposed to do as a parent. That doesn't mean you have to baby them or do everything for them. Like, they can do their own laundry, they can help with the cleaning and cooking and stuff like that. But once again, that's family values. That's the norm in a lot of different cultures. And I think as long as the child is contributing and is doing something with their lives, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. And I do think once they get married, they probably should move out, if only for privacy purposes, but I think it's very dependent. Maybe you have a parent who has a bad medical condition and they need someone to support them, and you can work from home or something, so you're also supporting them as well as living with them. So once again, I think you shouldn't be too hard on people who do that. It's also very economically dependent. Compared to a lot of previous time periods, careers just take a lot longer for people to start, because most careers require, at the bare minimum, a bachelor's degree or trade school or something else. So it's, when someone's done high school at the age of 17, they aren't necessarily in a position where they can go and get a job that'll pay enough. I mean, minimum wage isn't enough to live on. Maybe you can get like a slightly better job and then live basically on the edge of bankruptcy for an extended period of time, and maybe in 5 to 10 years you can make enough money to put a little bit of cash away, but you'll probably never make enough money to ever afford to have a family or anything like that, because rent prices are so high and a lot of other stuff is really high. So it's like, I just don't get, is it to make a point? Like, is it to say, oh, well, your kid has to go hungry and they have to do the grind and stuff like that? And by that I mean like living on the edge of bankruptcy, not being able to save any money, having no cash reserve. Like, I just don't get how that's inherently valuable. Once again, you can and should be working. You can and should be pursuing a career. You can and should be, even if you're someone who can't work because they have a disability or they're trying to deal with some mental stuff, they have to be actively working on it. And as long as they're trying to go somewhere with their lives, I don't really see there's anything wrong with the parents supporting them. Now, if the parents are in severe financial trouble, once again, that scenario is a little bit different. But I think it's a very much a case-by-case basis, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. The family is the fundamental unit of society. It precedes the state, it precedes the community, it precedes everything. And the family sticks together. I mean, and once again, a big caveat in all these cases, if you have a family that, like if your parents are degenerates or they're drug addicts or they're abusive or they're just insane or something, then this doesn't apply to you. And I'm sorry for that situation in your life. But if you have parents who aren't like pieces of shit, who are decent people, you look out for them and they look out for you. And that's kind of how the scenario works. And I remember there was a conservative commentator I was listening to, and for once he actually kind of surprised me, because he said, I don't really mind if like adult children live with their parents, because they're on their mommy and daddy's dime, but at least they're not on my mommy and daddy's dime. Like, in a lot of cases, the alternative is, okay, would you rather have the person be supported and helped by their parents, or have the state, through tax revenue, build affordable housing or pay for their rent? I mean, which one makes more sense? That's kind of like the question you have to ask yourself. Which is more moral? Which is more just? The family as much as possible to help each other out, or society to just pay for everything? Now, obviously, that's not, I'm not being a libertarian or something. Like, I don't think a family should bankrupt itself if someone has an illness or something like that, but you get what I'm saying. So I don't really think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think people should really feel bad about it. In a lot of cases, even if the person, like if they have a decent sized house, the person gets married and they live there with their parents and their children, and it's like a generational household, and then they look after their their parents when they're seniors. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like I said, it depends on your situation, where you live, the time period you live in. A lot of these things aren't really black and white. But the idea that, like, the second your kid turns 18, you, like, throw them on the street and tell them to go fuck themselves and you have no further responsibility to them, I think is just like, how is that family values? How is that a conservative perspective? I'm not saying you have to, like, fund your kids' gambling addiction or let them spend all their money on hookers and blow or be a complete degenerate or something. But, I mean, they're still your kid. And for a lot of people, historically, that is your purpose in life. What you want and what you work your life for is to leave money to your kids, to leave a business to your kids, to leave a house to your kids, so your kids and their descendants can have a better life than what you had. That is, generally speaking, the purpose of human society. There's other purposes, obviously, aesthetic, spiritual, etc., but that is the primary goal of human society, is so that people can leave the next generation, both collectively and in terms of your family, better off than the previous one. And trying to do what you can to ensure your kid is successful, even if that means helping them out when they're a young adult and they're getting set up in the world. I don't really see, once again, what the issue is with that. Why that makes them a loser and why you should, like, denigrate them for that. I think in a lot of cases, denigrating people for things like that and saying they're losers and saying that they're, like, need to go live on the street or whatever, I don't think that's productive. I don't think that helps the person. I think really all it does is just discourages the person, makes them feel like a loser. And instead, you should really be encouraging the person to just focus on moving forward. Like, don't feel bad about living with your parents. Don't spend time, like, obsessing over it and getting upset about it and getting discouraged. just focus on getting somewhere with your job or finishing your education, or if you're disabled or mentally ill, getting treatment. That is something productive. Being upset because you feel like you're a loser and you're not going anywhere is like not helpful. And I know that's very hard to say, and there is a tendency, especially with our generation, to kind of wallow in self-hatred. And once again, you get guilty about wallowing in self-hatred, so you get guilty about your guilt, and it's just this endless cycle. So the truth of the matter is, life is difficult. No matter how rich the society is, no matter how great your support system is and the people you know are, life is really, really hard. And you shouldn't feel bad if you stumble. You shouldn't feel bad if your parents have to help you out or society has to help you out or something. You just have to do what you can and try to keep stumbling forward. Getting completely discouraged is the worst thing that you can really do, and not doing anything. So hopefully people found that interesting. Maybe people agree, maybe people don't agree. Interested to see the comments, but those are my thoughts on the matter. As I've said, guys, I just try to be real with you about my experiences, my situation. I'm not here to LARP and say I'm Mr. Entrepreneur or I'm Mr. Super Trad or something. I'm just a guy in my early 30s trying to figure out the world, trying to make my way in it, and try to share some of my thoughts and experiences. And if that helps out some of my younger male listeners, that's great. That's really good. Anyways, God bless everyone. Good luck in life. Just keep going forward.